And now on the line is Eunan McKinney, the Head of Communications and Advocacy from Alcohol Action Ireland. Eunan, welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having me on, Darren.
Eunan, we're doing this interview today to talk about what I believe is a fascinating report yourselves and Alcohol Action Ireland brought out last week. And you can also maybe tell us more briefly what you were calling for in the budget next week. Okay, first of all, the report is brought out last week. Can you fill our listeners in, for those who don't know, on what it was all about?
So the research project which we published last week produces the findings of a study that we had commissioned the Institute of Social Marketing and Health in the University of Stirling to research the level of alcohol promotion which was evident during the Six Nations Rugby Championship matches, with a particular focus on two of the Ireland matches that would have taken place, the home games against Wales and Scotland. And so the report found that in the broadcast of the Ireland home match against Wales, viewers were targeted with 754 alcohol promotion messages during that broadcast, and that is one every 15 seconds. And during the Scottish game, it was 600, a little lower, 690. So that's one every 16 seconds. And so what we're trying to demonstrate here is just the level of what we would regard as pernicious and to some degree subliminal advertising and promotion of alcohol that's taking place during these type of sports broadcasts that are sponsored by alcohol brands. And of course, you know, what we're trying to, the broader point is that we know that children are particularly keen and interested in sport. It's one of the main things in their lives. And so we think it's a real problem that this level of promotion is taking place during these broadcasts and that children are exposed to this level of alcohol marketing in their daily lives.
Yeah, it's a huge issue. I find personally the sports and media marketing and sponsorship of sports to be mostly disgusting. The issue of alcohol advertising and sports sponsorship is mentioned, I believe, in the Public Health Alcohol Act, is it?
It is. There's a Section 16 of the Act but ensures that any alcohol marketing of children-orientated events cannot be sponsored by alcohol brands. Now, okay, that I would suggest that that's not exactly the most revolutionary piece of legislation. Prior to the legislation, I can't think of any child-focused event that was been sponsored by an alcohol brand. But nevertheless, it is a statement of intent, perhaps. But of course, the major issue that's relevant to this particular discussion around the report that we produced last week is that another section of the Act will come into place from the 12th of November this coming year, and that will ensure that all alcohol promotion in or on the field of sports area will be prohibited. So that's quite an interesting development, because as this study shows in the detail of the report, and people can go onto our website if they're interested and get a copy of the report, but it shows that around 50% of those promotions that we talked about, the 750 during the Welsh game, about half of those were actually within the sporting area, the pitch. So in other words, the ball, the goalposts, the actual physical pitch, the ground of the pitch, the flag posts, all of those types of promotions and cues, they will largely have to go from the 12th of November this year, from the field of sport, not just in rugby but in other sports as well, so that you can't have it. And that will make some difference. There's no question about that. So if we have, there's one of the outstanding measures in the Public Health Act is what's called the broadcast watershed, which would ensure that no alcohol is advertised on television or on radio before 9 o'clock at night. Now, if that had been put in place in tandem with what's coming in November, we would move to a situation where a lot of what we're talking about actually would be dismissed, and that's evident in what we see in the report from France. We did a similar research as part of this report. We looked at the France-England game, which was played in the Stade de France in Paris. And in that instance, only 193 references were available during the match. Now, 193 as opposed to 754, or indeed in the Scottish English game, which was played in Merrifield, Scotland, that actually rose as far as 961. That's one every 12 seconds. So the difference. So people will say, well, what's the difference in France? Well, the difference in France is that they have the law that we have, except that they've implemented it. So it makes a big difference.
Okay, when you're saying the part of the Alcohol Act coming in the next month, and you mentioned there like the pitch, whatever pitch of sports going on, do you know the kind of billboards or placards around the pitch? I can't think of the name of them.
Yeah.
Will
they won't be banned. They won't be.
They won't.
They'll be able to continue to advertise on those, because those hoardings aren't part of the actual sporting area.
Okay.
So it's a slight. At the time, it was a compromise which was driven by the legislators in trying to get the bill through the Parliament and through Cabinet. And so, like the bigger issue to talk about in that context is that initially, when this bill was proposed and when it was been debated back in 2013, 2012, 2013, the ban on sports sponsorship was fundamental to the act or to the bill, but actually that got lost in the way because they couldn't get government consensus around the project of actually banning alcohol sponsorship from sport, which of course fundamentally that's what I agree with, and that's what should be done. Is there should be no place for alcohol in sport, none at all.
Yeah, I agree with you. And after all the measures come in of the Act, I don't know when that is, but there's going to be a review about sponsorship and marketing within 2 years.
Well, when all the measures are in place, there will be a review. I think it's 3 years after they have come in. So that would be an opportunity. But of course, there are major aspects of the bill which are outstanding, and it's only when they are actually implemented can that review take place. So it's kind of a chicken and an egg scenario there, So we yet have to see commencement of the labelling provisions. We have yet to see the commencement of the content of advertising, which is a really significant development. The placement of advertisements, the watershed, as I outlined, and the measures around notification of licence owners for renewal to the HSE. All of those measures have yet to be commenced, and they're quite significant measures.
Okay, I'll come back to you talking about that again anyway, as you've done many times. Don't keep it much longer. Can you fill our listeners in a bit, Eunan, on what you're calling for in next week's budget?
Well, just two things in particular. I mean, one of the areas where we see constant lobbying by the alcohol industry is to have excise duties reduced. And so we're saying that excise duties certainly should not be reduced, and more fundamentally, that excise duties should be aligned and linked to the consumer price index. Because what has happened is excise duties are now falling way behind what has been essentially an inflationary period. And so they're becoming less and less meaningful in the context of what they're endeavouring to do. So we think that should absolutely, if we're going to keep the relative price of alcohol equivalent to what people are earning, then we need to ensure that those excise duties are aligned to consumer price index. That's one issue. The bigger issue is we're calling for a social responsibility levy to be placed on all economic operators within the realm of the sale of alcohol. And what we propose is that there should be a 1% levy placed on all on-trade sales, so that's bars, restaurants and clubs, and a 2% levy should be placed on all off-trade sales. And so if you were to do that and gather some sufficient level of funding, that we would be able to tackle many of the outstanding issues that are so pertinent to the whole issue of around mental health around children and adults in terms of alcohol dual diagnosis. We also think that those there's a crying need for a greater alcohol intervention at primary care level, and so similarly, the appointment of alcohol liaison nurses in our hospitals needs to be done. And we can see from a recent report as well that we had done during the summer that there's a chronic shortage of alcohol treatment places. And so we're saying that with that level of funding that you can gather, which would be about 100 million if you did that, you could have a significant amount of monies to tackle what are the requirements that are outlined in our budget proposals.
Yeah, there's a huge lack of alcohol addiction services. I know that from experience. Okay, just one more thing, Eunan, before you go.
Yeah.
I believe you have a series of talks coming up soon, don't you? Just call.
We do. Thank you for allowing us to say about this. We have a new series of events called End the Silence, and again, this is about trying to bring into the open debate and into the public mind the plight of the 200,000 children who live every day with the daily chaos of parental problem alcohol use in their homes. And we know that they exist from the research that has been carried out by the HSE and Trinity College back in 2018, that there are around 200,000 children who are living in those types of circumstances every day. Those children will go on to have difficult lives because they have been traumatized in their childhood. And we know that obviously with our history with alcohol in Ireland, there's a lot of adult children who are actually living and managing their lives with managing that trauma later in life. And so what we're trying to do in this series is bring together through a series of talks, film showing, a screening of a film, a talk by a leading psychoanalyst expert from California, and a series of events that are been run on the last day of this. So if people are interested in this, they can Google End the Silence, and it'll bring them to our website, or you can go onto our website and scroll down to the End the Silence campaign page, and you'll find all the details of the events that are taking place between October the 18th and October 26th this coming month.